Hey guys. Tonight we slip into the dusty, sun-baked streets of Uruk, circa 3000 BCE, where you're a Sumerian beer maid hustling through a world of clay tablets and barley brews. Picture this. The air hums with the scent of baked earth, distant goat bells, and the faint tang of fermenting grain. Your life's a whirlwind of grinding, brewing, and serving beer. Sumer's liquid gold in a city pulsing with scribes, traders, and the occasional cranky priest. Fair warning, one wrong move in this gig, and you're bartering your last sheep to survive the week. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're chilling tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the pre-dawn chill sprawled on a reed mat in your one-room mud brick home. The walls rough and cool lean inward like they're whispering secrets. Outside, Uruk's stirring donkeys bray, and someone's already yelling about a lost sandal. Your eyes sting from sleep, but there's no hitting snooze in ancient Sumer. You roll over joints creaking like a poorly oiled cart and fumble for a clay water jug. The water's gritty tastes like river silt, but it shocks you awake. You splash some on your face, blinking at the faint glow seeping through a narrow window slit. Your home's sparse, a wooden stool, a basket of dried dates, and a cracked pot for offerings to Inanna, goddess of love and war. You mutter a quick prayer, part habit, part hope. She'll keep the brewery's vats from souring today. Historians still argue whether Sumerian women like you had real clout or were just cogs in Uruk's machine, but you feel the weight of both. You're no priestess, but beer's sacred here, and you're its keeper. A quirky tidbit. Some clay tablets suggest beer maids doubled as informal bankers trading brew for goods. Imagine that you're slinging pints and running a proto-ATM. You stretch wincing at a bruise from yesterday's grain-grinding marathon. Your tunic, a coarse linen rectangle, hangs on a peg. You slip it on, tying it with a hemp cord. No mirrors, so you pat your hair braided tight last night to avoid tangles. Sandals, just leather soles strapped to your feet, already caked with dust. You grab a shawl for the evening chill and step outside. The alley's narrow, smelling of smoke and yesterday's fish. Neighbors shuffle past lugging baskets or herding kids. One old man toothless grins and says, "You owe him a free beer." You laugh joke number one and tell him to dream on. Uruk's skyline looms, ziggurats squat against the horizon, their steps like giants' teeth. The Euphrates glints nearby, feeding the city's pulse. You weave through a crowd, sidestepping a puddle that's definitely not water. A kid darts past, chasing a hoop with a stick. You envy his energy. Your day's about to be a slog, 12 hours, maybe more, and no such thing as a weekend. Still, there's a rhythm to it, a gritty pride. You're part of Uruk's hum, its lifeblood. Beer's not just a drink here. It's currency, ritual, survival. As you turn a corner, the brewery's scent hits barley yeast and something faintly sour. Your stomach growls, but breakfast is a luxury. You'll snag a hunk of bread later, maybe some onion if you're lucky. For now, you're just another shadow moving through the dawn, ready to grind, stir, and serve. The city doesn't care if you're tired. It's awake, and so are you. You're out the door, the dawn chill clinging to your shawl as you step into Uruk's waking chaos. The brewery's not far, but first you've got to prep for the day ahead. Your tunic scratches against your skin, a reminder of the long hours waiting. You adjust the hemp cord at your waist, making sure its snug loose knots mean wardrobe malfunctions, and you're not here to entertain the street kids. You pause by a communal water jar near your alley, dipping a clay cup for another gritty sip. It's not coffee, but it'll do. You rinse your hands, scrubbing off yesterday's barley dust, and check your braid. Stray hairs are a hazard when you're elbow deep in grain later. Back home, you grab a woven basket for carrying essentials, a flint knife for cutting reeds, a small clay token for brewery tallies, and a lump of dried figs for a mid-morning snack. You sling the basket over your shoulder, its weight a familiar tug. The mud brick walls of your house glow faintly orange now, kissed by the rising sun. You lock the wooden door, more a formality since thieves know you've got nothing but debts and a bad attitude. Joke number 2. Your life's so glamorous, you're basically Uruk's version of a reality TV star, minus the fame. Sumerians took their beers seriously, and brewing was often women's work, a fact etched into clay tablets from the period. You're part of that legacy, turning barley into liquid gold. A quirky tidbit: some scholars think beer maids like you chewed grain to kickstart fermentation and using saliva's enzymes. Gross maybe, but effective. Historians still argue whether this was common or just a ritual for special brews, but you're glad your brewery skips that step. Your jaw's sore enough from gossiping. You head toward the market street where you'll pick up a few supplies before work. The air's warming, carrying scents of baked clay and fresh dung. You pass a potter shaping jars, his wheel creaking like an out-of-tune lute. You nod to him, and he grunts back Uruk's version of small talk. At a stall, you barter a fig for a bundle of clean straws, the kind patrons use to sip beer from jars. Straws aren't just fancy. They filter out the chunky bits floating in the brew. You tuck them into your basket, dodging a merchant, waving a fish in your face. Fresh from the Euphrates, he shouts. You roll your eyes and keep moving. The street's getting crowded now, a tangle of linen-clad bodies and overloaded donkeys. You sidestep a pile of something you'd rather not identify and spot a temple priestess gliding by, her robes fringed with beads. She's headed for the ziggurat, probably to pray for a good harvest. You envy her clean hands, but not her stiff posture. Your life's grittier, but at least you get to laugh with the brewery crew. Speaking of, you're running late. You pick up the pace sandals slapping against the packed dirt. The brewery's just past the next canal, its low roof peeking over a cluster of date palms. You can already hear the grindstones' rhythmic scrape, a sound that'll haunt your dreams. Your shoulders tense, anticipating the day's labor. You're not just a beer maid. You're a cog in Uruk's economy, keeping the city buzzed and the gods appeased. Beers offered to deities like Ninkasi, the brewing goddess, and you've seen priests pour out jars during rituals. Spill a drop and you're begging for forgiveness. As you near the canal, a kid tosses a pebble, nearly clipping your ear. You shoot him a mock glare, and he giggles, scampering off. You can't help but grin. Uruk's chaos has a charm, like a bad date you keep showing up for. The brewery's gate is in sight now, its wooden beams weathered but sturdy. You take a deep breath, the air thick with promise and dust. Time to dive into the grind, literally. You're weaving through Uruk's morning crush, the brewery's gate just a stone's throw away. The city's alive now, a sweaty tangle of noise and motion. You dodge a merchant balancing a stack of reed baskets, his curses trailing as he wobbles. A stray goat nibbles at your sandal strap. Shooing it earns you a bleat that sounds personally offended. The air's thick with dust sweat and the sharp tang of drying fish from a nearby stall. Your basket bounces against your hip, the straws you bartered for earlier, poking out like tiny spears. You're late, and the brewery boss Enki isn't known for patience. Joke number 1. Enki's glare could curdle a vat of beer faster than a bad yeast batch. Uruk's streets are a maze of mud brick walls and narrow alleys, some barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. You skirt a canal, its water sluggish and green, reflecting the date palms leaning overhead. A kid splashes in it, ignoring his mother's shouts. You envy his freedom, your day's about to be all sweat and sore muscles. Sumerians built Uruk as one of the world's first true cities, with tens of thousands crammed into its walls by 3000 BCE. That's no small feat when plumbing's a dream and garbage piles are basically decor. A quirky tidbit: Some tablets hint at early street food vendors selling beer-soaked bread. Imagine you grabbing a quick bite, munching what's basically a soggy beer sandwich. Historians still argue whether Uruk's urban sprawl empowered workers like you, or just trapped you in endless toil. Either way, you're hustling. You pass a scribe scratching cuneiform into a clay tablet, his stylus moving like a nervous bird. He glances up, probably judging your dusty tunic. You flash a smirk and keep moving. The brewery's close now, its low walls rising past a cluster of tamarisk trees. You hear the faint clatter of jars and the grindstone's relentless drone. Your shoulders already ache remembering yesterday's labor. A donkey cart blocks the street piled high with barley sacks. The driver's arguing with a guard over taxes, their voices sharp as flint. You squeeze past, brushing against the cart's rough wood. A barley grain sticks to your arm. Great, you're already part of the inventory. The crowd thins as you near the brewery district, where workshops hum with potters, weavers, and smiths. You spot a woman kneading dough, her hands dusted with flour. She nods and you nod back, a silent salute between workers who get it. The brewery gate looms, its wooden beams etched with faded carvings of Ninkasi, the beer goddess. You pause, catching your breath. The air's warmer now, the sun climbing fast. You adjust your shawl, tucking it tighter against the breeze. Inside, you'll face Enki's scowl and a mountain of barley to grind. Joke number 2. Enki probably thinks motivational speech means yelling louder. You step forward, sandals crunching on loose gravel. A stray dog trots by, sniffing for scraps. You toss it a fig from your basket. Charity's cheap when you're broke. The gate creaks as you push through, revealing the brewery's courtyard. It's a hive of motion workers haul jars, sweep floors, and shout over the grindstones hum. The scent hits you, barley yeast and that faint sour edge of fermentation. It's not exactly perfume, but it's home. You spot Enki near a stack of clay vats, his arms crossed like he's guarding the gates of the underworld. You brace yourself, ready for the day's grind. The city's pulse fades behind you, replaced by the brewery's rhythm. You're here, and there's no turning back. You're through the brewery gate, the courtyard buzzing like a kicked beehive. The air's heavy with barley dust and the sharp, yeasty tang of fermenting beer. Workers hustle around you, hauling sacks, stirring vats, and dodging Enki's barked orders. He spots you, his scowl deeper than a canal ditch. Late again, he grumbles, tossing you a clay tablet to mark your hours. You nod, avoiding his glare, and slip toward the grinding area. Joke number 1. Enki's face could make a ziggurat weep, but you're not here to win his heart. The brewery's a sprawling maze of mud brick rooms and open courtyards, its walls stained with years of spilled mash. You pass towering clay jars, some as tall as you, sealed with reed caps to keep out flies. The grindstone's rhythmic scrape fills the air, a sound that's both torture and comfort. You drop your basket by a low bench, tucking the straws and flint knife out of sight. The space smells like a mix of bread sweat and something faintly sour, like that time you left milk out too long. Except this is intentional. Sumerians brewed beer as a staple, with records showing it was rationed to workers daily, sometimes instead of wages. A quirky tidbit, they had a beer goddess Ninkasi, whose hymn is basically a 4,000-year-old brewing recipe. Historians still argue whether her worship was more about devotion or just an excuse to get tipsy at temple parties. You settle at a grindstone, a heavy basalt slab worn smooth by years of use. A pile of barley waits, golden and unyielding. You grab a wooden pestle, its handle polished by countless hands, and start crushing. Your shoulders burn within minutes, but you find a rhythm rocking back and forth. Across from you, Ishtar, a fellow beer maid, with a wicked laugh, grinds her own pile. "Dream of anything good?" she asks, smirking. You snort, saying you dreamt of Enki smiling. Joke number 2. She cackles, nearly spilling her grain. The work's brutal, but there's a strange pride in it. You're turning raw barley into the base for beer, a process unchanged for centuries. The grains crunch under your pestle, releasing a nutty scent that mingles with the courtyard's haze. You glance at the vats nearby, where yesterday's mash bubbles softly. The brewery's output feeds Uruk's taverns, temples, and even the palace. Mess up, and you're not just out of a job, you're offending the gods. No pressure, right? Ishtar leans over, whispering about a new trader in town, one with beads from lands beyond the mountains. You roll your eyes, but listen, grateful for the distraction. The sun's climbing, baking the courtyard. Sweat beads on your forehead, and you wipe it with your sleeve, leaving a streak of barley dust. A fly buzzes too close, and you swat it with a curse that'd make a sailor blush. Joke number 3. If flies paid for beer, you'd be richer than the king. You pause to stretch your back, screaming. The courtyard's a whirlwind, workers shout, jars clatter, and Enki's still pacing like a cranky vulture. You spot a young apprentice, barely 10, sweeping straw from the floor. He's new, all wide eyes and clumsy hands. You toss him a fig from your basket, and he grins like you handed him gold. Small moments like that keep you going. The brewery's not just work. It's a second home, chaotic, but yours. You turn back to the grindstone, the day stretching ahead like an endless road. You're hunched over the grindstone, barley dust coating your hands like a second skin. The courtyard hums with the brewery's pulse grinds, shouts, and the occasional clatter of a dropped jar. Your arms ache, each pestle swing a small battle. But you're in the zone now, crushing grain into coarse flour. Ishtar across from you hums a tune, something about a river goddess and a lovesick fisherman. You smirk, half listening, half lost in the rhythm. The sun's high, baking the mud brick walls, and sweat trickles down your back. Joke number 1. You're basically a human oven, except the only thing rising is your annoyance. The pile of barley shrinks slowly, each grain a tiny victory. You scoop the flour into a reed basket, careful not to spill. Enki's got eyes like a hawk. The brewery's grindstones are ancient tech powered by nothing but muscle and stubbornness. Sumerians were grinding barley for beer as far back as 3500 BCE, with archaeological digs unearthing basalt stones just like yours. A quirky tidbit, some tablets mention beer bread, a fermented loaf crumbled into water to make mash. It's like the Sumerians invented beer and artisanal sourdough in one go. Historians still argue whether this bread was a brewing staple or just a snack for lazy brewers. You glance at Ishtar, who's now gossiping about a priest who got caught sneaking extra beer rations. Swears it was for Inanna, she says, rolling her eyes. You laugh, nearly knocking over your basket. The story's probably half true, but it's gold. You lean into the grindstone muscles, screaming, and notice a new ache in your wrist. Great, another badge of honor. You shake it off, grabbing a sip from a clay cup of weak beer left on the bench. It's warm, gritty, but it cuts through the dust in your throat. A shadow falls over you. Enki checking progress. He grunts, inspecting your flour pile, then moves on without a word. High praise coming from him. Joke number 2. Enki's approval is rarer than a rainstorm in summer. You catch Ishtar's eye, and she mimics his scowl, making you choke on your beer. The courtyard's a sauna now, and you're dreaming of the midday break, maybe a shady palm to collapse under. For now, though, it's you, the grindstone, and an endless sea of barley. You finish a batch and haul the basket to a mixing area where older women knead flour into mash. One Nanshi nods at you, her hands caked with dough. She's been here forever, claims she brewed for the king's father. You believe her? She's got the scars and stories to prove it. You tip your flour into a clay trough, watching it blend with water and yeast. The mixture's sticky, smelling like damp earth and promise. This is where the magic starts, where grain becomes beer, though it's still a long way from the tavern. A fly lands on the trough's edge and you flick it away, muttering about hygiene standards that don't exist. Joke number 3. If Uruk had health inspectors, the brewery'd be shut down by noon. You wipe your hands on your tunic, leaving floury streaks, and head back to the grindstone. Another pile of barley waits, mocking you. Ishtar's moved on to a new song, something about a lost goat. You join in off-key, just to pass the time. The brewery's chaos feels like family gruff sweaty, but yours. You settle in pestle in hand, ready to grind until your bones beg for mercy. You're back at the grindstone. But now you're done crushing barley for the moment, and it's time to stir the mash. You haul your basket of flour to the mixing trough, where Nanshi's already elbow-deep in a sticky blend of grain and water. The air's thick with the earthy, slightly sour smell of fermentation, like wet bread left in the sun. Your tunic's dusted with flour, and you're sweating through it, but there's a rhythm to this work that keeps you moving. Nanshi glances up, her weathered face creasing into a grin. "Don't just stand there, girl, stir," she barks, tossing you a wooden paddle. You smirk, grabbing it like a warrior hefting a spear. Joke number 1, you're basically a Sumerian chef, except your 5-star dish is alcoholic porridge. The trough's wide, its clay sides cool against your knuckles as you plunge the paddle in. The mash is thick, clinging to the wood like it's got a grudge. You lean in, stirring slow and steady, feeling the resistance in your shoulders. This is where beer begins mixing flour water and a bit of yesterday's mash to wake the yeast. Sumerians mastered this process with clay tablets detailing recipes that sound like alchemy barley dates and a prayer to Ninkasi. A quirky tidbit, some brews used emmer wheat for a nuttier kick, and archaeologists found traces of it in ancient vats. Historians still argue whether Sumerian beer was more like a tangy soup or a proper pint. Either way, it kept Uruk happy. You stir, watching bubbles rise in the mash, a sign the yeast's doing its job. Nanshi hums an old tune, something about a flood that drowned a bad brewer. You chuckle, asking if it's a warning. She winks, saying, "Only if you ruin my batch." The brewery's quieter now. The grindstone's paused as workers shift to mixing or vat checking. You spot Ishtar hauling a water jug, her braids swinging like a pendulum. She catches your eye and mimics drowning in the trough. Joke number 2. You snort, nearly splashing mash on your tunic. The sun's brutal beating down on the courtyard. You wipe sweat from your brow, leaving a floury smear. A stray dog noses around, hoping for scraps, but you shoo it gently with your sandal. The mash is loosening up, easier to stir, and you fall into a trance-like rhythm. Nanshi leans over, inspecting your work. "Good," she grunts, which is basically a love letter from her. She starts telling you about a trick, adding crushed dates for a sweeter brew. You nod, filing it away. These secrets are gold passed down like family heirlooms. A fly buzzes too close, and you swat it, cursing under your breath. Joke number 3. You're fighting a war against flies, and they're winning. You glance at the vats across the courtyard, where tomorrow's beer ferments in clay jars. Mess up this mash, and you're serving flat, sour slop to Uruk's finest. No thanks. You keep stirring the paddle, heavy in your hands. Nanshi's moved on to another trough, leaving you alone with the mash and your thoughts. You think about that trader Ishtar mentioned, the one with mountain beads. Maybe you'll barter for one if Enki pays you this week. The courtyard's alive again, workers shouting as a fresh barley shipment arrives. You hear Enki's voice, sharp as ever, directing the chaos. You're glad to be here, stirring in relative peace. The mash is ready, smooth and bubbling, ready for the vats. You step back, wiping your hands, and feel a small surge of pride. You're not just a beer maid, you're keeping Uruk's spirit alive, one trough at a time. You've handed off the mash to Nanshi, and now you're trudging across the brewery courtyard, the sun scorching your neck like a cranky god's glare. Your job's shifting. You're on fermentation duty, checking the clay vats where the beer's coming to life. The air's thick with that sour, yeasty tang, and your tunic's a mess of flour and sweat stains. You weave past a worker hauling a reed basket, nearly tripping over a stray clay shard. The vats loom ahead, rows of fat sealed jars baking in the heat. You grab a small clay cup for sampling and brace yourself, mess this up, and you're serving swamp water to Uruk's elite. Joke number 1. You're basically a beer doctor, but your patients are pickier than a temple priest. Each vat's a beast, its clay walls warm from the fermenting mash inside. You kneel by the first, prying off the reed cap with a grunt. The smell hits sharp bready with a hint of something alive. You dip your cup, scooping a murky sample. It's cloudy, flecked with grain bits, and tastes like tangy liquid bread. Not bad, but it needs another day. Sumerians drank beer like we drink water, with vats like these supplying cities as early as 3000 BCE. A quirky tidbit: some vats were buried in the ground to keep cool like ancient fridges. Historians still argue whether this was for flavor or just to stop the beer from turning to vinegar in the Mesopotamian heat. You move down the row, checking seals and sniffing for trouble. Sour notes mean a batch is doomed. One vat's bubbling too fast, foam creeping up like it's plotting escape. You call over Ishtar, who's lugging a water jug nearby. This one's feisty, you say, pointing. She peers in, smirking, and says it's probably cursed by a grumpy spirit. Joke number 2. You both agree to blame Enki's bad mood for any bad brews. You reseal the vat, marking it with a clay token to check tomorrow. The courtyard's a furnace now, and you're dreaming of shade. You wipe your brow, smearing more flour across your face. Great, you're a walking bakery. A fly lands on your arm, and you flick it off, muttering about how they're the real brewery bosses. Joke number 3. If you could train flies to stir mash, you'd be sipping beer in the shade by now. You spot Nanshi across the yard, still at the troughs, her hands moving like she's taming a river. She's taught you plenty, like how to spot a good ferment by smell alone. You're not there yet, but you're learning. Enki stomps by, barking at a kid who dropped a jar. You keep your head down, focusing on the vats. One's got a crack, leaking a slow drip of mash. You grab some straw and clay from a nearby pile, patching it like you're plastering a wall. It's not pretty, but it'll hold. The brewery's a machine, and one of its gears break down, and the whole thing stumbles. You finish the row, your cup half full of warm, gritty beer from sampling. It's not exactly refreshing, but it's yours. You lean against a vat, catching your breath. Ishtar's back, gossiping about a trader who tried to pay with fake tokens. You laugh, saying he's bold to scam a brewery full of tired, paddle-wielding women. The day's half gone and your body's screaming for a break. You glance at the sky, midday's close, and with it a chance to sit, eat, and maybe forget the vats for a moment. For now, you seal the last jar, the brewery's hum wrapping around you like a gritty, familiar hug. You're done with the vats, your hands sticky with mash residue. The sun's at its peak, turning the brewery courtyard into a clay oven. Your stomach's growling louder than a cranky donkey. And the promise of a midday break is the only thing keeping you upright. You wipe your hands on your tunic, useless since it's already a canvas of flour and sweat, and grab your basket, the figs inside, calling your name. You shuffle toward a cluster of date palms at the courtyard's edge, their shade a rare gift in this heat. Ishtar's already there, sprawled on a reed mat, tearing into a hunk of flatbread. Took you long enough, she says, tossing you a piece. You catch it, grinning, and plop down beside her. Joke number 1. This breaks your vacation, except the resort's dusty and the drinks are gritty. You tear off a chunk of bread, crusty and warm, and pair it with a fig from your basket. The sweetness cuts through the bread's plain heft, and you sigh, leaning against the palm's rough trunk. Nearby, a clay jar holds weak beer, the kind too low in alcohol to sell, but perfect for workers. You pour a cup, sipping through a straw to avoid the floating bits. It's tangy, warm, and tastes like survival. Sumerians relied on beer for nutrition, with some estimates suggesting workers downed liters daily for calories and hydration. A quirky tidbit: they sometimes flavored beer with honey or herbs, but only the rich got the good stuff. You're stuck with the budget brew. Historians still argue whether this daily beer ration was a perk or just a way to keep workers docile and dependent. Ishtar's gossiping again this time about a scribe who proposed to a priestess and got laughed out of the temple. You snort, nearly choking on your bread, and say he's got more guts than brains. Joke number 2. Love in Uruk's riskier than brewing with bad yeast. The shade's a blessing, but the air's still heavy, carrying the brewery's yeasty hum. You stretch your legs, sandals caked with dirt, and notice a new blister on your palm. Grinding and stirring are taking their toll, but you're too tired to care. You glance at the courtyard where Enki's yelling at a kid for spilling water. Same old chaos. A stray cat slinks by, eyeing your bread. You toss it a crumb, and it darts off like you insulted its ancestors. Ishtar laughs, saying you're too soft for Uruk. You shrug. Small kindnesses keep you sane. The break's short, maybe half an hour, and you savor every second. You pull out another fig, splitting it with Ishtar, and ask about her sister who's training to be a weaver. She rolls her eyes, saying the girl's more interested in flirting with traders. You both chuckle, the sound blending with the distant clatter of jars. The beer's gone to your head, just enough to dull the ache in your shoulders. You lean back, closing your eyes for a moment, the palms shade a fleeting cocoon. Joke number 3, if you fall asleep here, Enki'll probably fire you and hire the cat. You're half tempted to test that theory, but the tavern shift's looming. You'll be serving soon, dodging rowdy patrons and their wandering hands. For now, though, you're just a beer maid, stealing a moment of peace, the brewery's hum, a steady heartbeat behind you. The figs are gone, the bread's a memory, and the jar's nearly empty. Time slipping back to work soon, but not yet. You're reluctantly leaving the palms shade the midday break, already a fading memory. Your stomach's settled, but your legs feel like they've been hauling vats all morning, which, well, they have. The brewery courtyard's still a furnace, and you're headed to the tavern area to prep for the afternoon rush. You grab your basket, the straws inside clinking softly, and weave through workers lugging jars and sweeping up barley dust. Ishtar's stayed behind, claiming she's checking something, but probably just stealing an extra minute of rest. You don't blame her. Joke number 1, in Uruk's shade's worth more than a king's ransom, and you're all broke. The tavern's a low mud brick room attached to the brewery, its walls pocked with years of spills and scratches. You push through a reed curtain, the air inside cooler, but heavy with the ghost of yesterday's beer. Clay jars line the walls, some sealed, others open and ready for serving. You start arranging them on a low table, checking each for cracks or stale brew. Sumerians loved their taverns with tablets showing beer houses as social hubs, where scribes, traders, and even priests swapped stories over straws. A quirky tidbit. Some taverns doubled as makeshift banks where you'd trade beer for goods or settle debts. Basically, you're a bartender and a bookkeeper. Historians still argue whether these spots were egalitarian or just playgrounds for the elite who could afford the good stuff. You grab a bundle of straws from your basket, laying them out like tiny swords. They're not just for sipping. They keep patrons from choking on grain bits floating in the beer. You sweep the floor with a reed broom, kicking up dust that sticks to your sweaty arms. Great, you're a human mop now. A clay cup's overturned in a corner, someone's late-night fumble. You toss it into a pile for washing, muttering about patrons who can't hold their brew. Joke number 2, if clumsiness was a currency, Uruk's drunks would be richer than the gods. You check the open jars, dipping a finger into one to taste. It's sharp, fizzy, with a bready aftertaste, solid, ready for the crowd. You seal it loosely, moving to the next. The tavern's quiet now, but soon it'll be a zoo of loud voices and wandering hands. You've learned to dodge both, though it's a skill you wish you didn't need. Nanshi taught you to keep a flint knife tucked in your belt for the worst offenders, not to use, just to flash. So far, it's worked. A shadow moves at the entrance, Enki poking his head in. Faster, he grunts, then vanishes. You roll your eyes, mimicking his scowl to an empty room. Joke number 3. Enki's got two moods, grumpy and grumpier, and you're stuck with both. You finish setting up, wiping down the table with a damp rag. A stray cat slips through the curtain, sniffing for scraps. You shoo it gently, remembering the one from your break. Maybe it's following you, hoping for more crumbs. You wouldn't mind the company if it could pour beer. The tavern's ready jars, lined up like soldiers' straws, neat floor, as clean as it'll get. You lean against the wall, catching your breath. Outside, the brewery's hum mixes with Uruk's distant buzz. Donkeys shouts the clink of a potter's wheel. The afternoon's about to hit hard, and you're bracing for it. You adjust your braid, tuck your shawl tighter, and steal a sip of beer from a jar. It's warm, gritty, but it's yours. A tiny rebellion before the chaos begins. You're in the tavern jars, lined up, straws ready, and the reed curtain sways as the first patrons stumble in. The air's thick with the bready tang of beer and the faint musk of unwashed linen. You stand behind the low table, hands on hips, eyeing the crowd. Scribes with clay tablets, traders with dusty cloaks, and a loud-mouthed potter who's already slurring. The tavern's alive now, a chaotic hum of laughter and shouted bets. You grab a jar, pouring beer into clay cups, handing out straws like a general arming troops. Joke number 1. You're running Uruk's hottest bar, except the tips are sheep dung and bad poetry. The potter lurches forward, demanding a refill before his cup's even empty. You dodge his flailing arm, sliding a fresh jar his way with a tight smile. Sumerian taverns were the heart of social life, with records showing they hosted everyone from laborers to officials, swapping gossip and deals. A quirky tidbit: some patrons paid with beer tokens, clay chips stamped with symbols. Think arcade tokens, but for getting tipsy. Historians still argue whether these taverns were true melting pots or just another stage for the elite to flex their wealth while you poured. You weave through the crowd, refilling jars, ignoring a scribe's attempt at flirting. Your eyes shine like the Euphrates, he mumbles, beer sloshing. You roll your eyes. Joke number 2. If compliments were barley, you'd be retired by now. You spot Ishtar at the other end, handling her own pack of rowdies. She catches your eye, mimicking the scribe's goofy grin, and you nearly drop a cup, laughing. The noise is deafening: shouts, clinking jars, someone banging a table like it owes him money. Your sandals stick to the floor, tacky with spilled beer, and you're sweating through your tunic again. A trader, his cloak heavy with desert dust, waves you over. He's got a sharp face and sharper eyes, bartering a copper bead for a jar. You check the bead. It's real. Not one of those fakes Ishtar warned about, and pocket it, pouring his drink. He mutters about bandits on the northern roads, and you nod, half listening while scanning for trouble. The potter's getting handsy with a cupbearer, and you shoot her a look. She flashes her flint knife, and he backs off. Good. You've got your own knife tucked away, a trick you picked up from Nanshi's wisdom. The tavern's a battlefield, and you're dodging more than just hands. A cup flies past, shattering against the wall, someone's bad bet gone wrong. You curse under your breath, sweeping the shards with your sandal. Joke number 3. If you got paid for cleaning up after drunks, you'd own half of Uruk. Enki's nowhere in sight, probably counting barley in the back, leaving you to manage the chaos. You refill another jar, the beer's foam bubbling like it's mocking your exhaustion. The crowd's growing, and you're moving on instinct, pouring, dodging, smiling through gritted teeth. You lean against the table for a split second, catching your breath. The tavern's haze wraps around you, beer sweat, and the faint smoke of an oil lamp flickering in the corner. Ishtar's voice cuts through, yelling at a patron to stop singing off-key. You grin, grateful for her fire. This is your world now, gritty and loud. But it's got a pulse you can't ignore. You straighten up, ready for the next wave, the brewery's hum still echoing in your bones. You're deep in the tavern's chaos, the air a swamp of beer fumes, sweat, and half-shouted stories. The crowd's a mix of scribes, traders, and laborers, their voices blending into a roar that drowns out the brewery's hum. You're dodging elbows, pouring beer from heavy clay jars and handing out straws faster than you can blink. A trader's yelling about a lost donkey, waving his cup like it's a battle flag. You slide him a refill, avoiding his sloppy grin. Joke number 1. You're not just a beer maid, you're Uruk's unofficial therapist, serving brews and bad advice. The tavern's packed bodies pressed close, and you're weaving through like a dancer in a dust storm. A scribe, his tablet tucked under one arm, recites an epic about a hero slaying a river monster. You pause, jar in hand, caught by his words, something about a spear and a moonlit flood. Sumerians loved their stories with cuneiform tablets, preserving tales like the Epic of Gilgamesh, full of gods and impossible quests. A quirky tidbit. Some tavern-goers claim to channel spirits while drunk, spinning wild yarns about talking goats or cursed wells. Historians still argue whether these were just booze-fueled rants or glimpses into Sumerian folklore. You snap back as a laborer bangs his cup, demanding more. You pour straw in place, and he grumbles about the king's new taxes. You nod, half listening while scanning for trouble. Ishtar's across the room, shutting down a rowdy potter with a glare that could crack clay. You smirk, she's your backup in this madhouse. A cupbearer, barely 15, scurries past, juggling empty jars. You toss her a straw from your basket, and she flashes a grateful smile. Joke number 2, if teamwork makes the dream work, you're all dreaming of a nap. The floor's a mess, sticky with spilled beer and scattered straws. You kick a shard of broken clay under the table cleanings for later. A trader, the one with the copper bead from earlier, starts a story about a desert caravan ambushed by lions. You linger, pouring slowly, caught by his tale of narrow escapes. It's probably half-lies, but it's good, and the crowd's hooked, shouting for details. You remember Nanshi's advice, ears open, mouth shut. Tavern gossip is better than gold. You pocket another bead from a quiet patron, his eyes glassy, but his manners intact. A sudden crash. A laborer's knocked over a jar of beer, pooling like a sad river. You curse, grabbing a rag to mop it up, while he laughs like it's a festival. Joke number 3, if spilling was an art, this guy's a master sculptor. You're bone-tired, your arms heavy from pouring, but the tavern's pulse keeps you moving. The oil lamps flickering, casting shadows that make the crowd look like a scene from one of those epic tales. You spot a priest in the corner, sipping quietly, his robe too clean for this place. He's listening, not talking, probably spying for the temple. You lean against the wall for a second, wiping sweat from your brow. The beer's tangy scent clings to you, and your tunic's a lost cause. Ishtar's voice cuts through, teasing a scribe about his awful poetry. You grin, grateful for the noise, the mess, the life of it all. The night's young, and the stories are flowing as fast as the beer. You grab another jar, ready to keep the tavern's heart beating. You're still in the tavern, the din of laughter and slurred tales wrapping around you like a sweaty cloak. The oil lamp's flicker paints the walls with dancing shadows, and you're pouring beer from a clay jar, straws flying from your basket faster than you can count. The crowd's a beast now. Scribes arguing over tablet tallies, traders boasting of far-off deals, and that potter from earlier, still loud now, arm wrestling a laborer. You dodge a stray elbow, sliding a cup to a quiet weaver who mutters thanks. Joke number 1, you're not serving beer, you're taming a herd of drunken goats with straws. The tavern's a living pulse, each story and shout, adding to Uruk's heartbeat. You catch a snippet of the trader's lion tale from earlier. Now grown wilder, apparently he wrestled the beast bare-handed. You smirk, pouring for a scribe who's scribbling the story on a damp tablet. Sumerians used beer as currency, with tavern records on clay tablets showing trades for everything from grain to goats. A quirky tidbit. Some patrons paid with poems etched into clay as IOUs. Imagine you accepting a haiku for a pint. Historians still argue whether these poetic debts were legally binding or just drunken boasts that never saw daylight. You weave through the crowd, your tunic sticking to your skin. the air thick with beer and unwashed bodies. Ishtar's nearby, shutting down a trader's bad pickup line with a laugh that cuts like a flint knife. You grin, handing her a fresh jar to keep her side of the tavern flowing. A laborer spills his cup, cursing as beer soaks his sandals. You toss him a rag, saying, "Clean it, or you're cut off." He grumbles, but complies. Joke number 2. You're basically the tavern's mom, scolding grown men with sticky floors as your proof. A new patron, a grizzled farmer, slides you a clay token for a jar. You check it legit, stamped with Ninkasi's seal. He's quiet, sipping slowly, muttering about a bad harvest. You nod, half listening, while refilling a scribe's cup. The farmer's tale turns to omens, a 2-headed calf born last week, which he swears means floods. You shiver despite the heat, remembering Nanshi's warnings about angry gods. You're not superstitious, but you're not dumb enough to tempt fate either. You pocket the token, its weight a small comfort. The potter's arm wrestling match ends with a crash. Table's fine, but his pride's in shards. The crowd roars, and you roll your eyes, sweeping straws off the floor. Joke number 3. If ego was beer, this place would never run dry. You're exhausted, your arms heavy from lifting jars, but the tavern's energy keeps you moving. The weaver from earlier slips you a tiny reed charm, a thank you for the quick service. You tuck it into your belt next to your flint knife, feeling a flicker of warmth amid the chaos. You lean against the table, stealing a breath. The lamp's low, and Enki's still absent, probably dodging the mess. Ishtar's voice rings out, teasing the potter about his loss. You chuckle, the tavern's haze settling into your bones. It's a grind, but it's your grind story, spills and all. You grab another jar, ready for the next round, the night's pulse thrumming under your feet. You're bone-tired, the tavern's roar fading as the crowd thins, leaving only the stubborn drunks and a scribe still muttering poetry to his cup. The oil lamp's nearly dead, casting a weak glow over sticky floors and scattered straws. You're behind the table, counting clay tokens and beads. From the night's trade, your fingers smudged with dust and beer. Ishtar's stacking empty jars, her braid fraying from the long shift. The air's heavy, sour with spilled brew, but the worst of the chaos is over. You glance at the potter slumped in a corner, snoring like a sick donkey. Joke number 1. If snoring was a job, he'd be Uruk's richest man. You tally the tokens, small stamped clay pieces that track who paid what. Some are for beer, others for bartered goods like wool or reeds. Sumerians invented one of the earliest accounting systems with clay tokens like these, evolving into cuneiform records by 3000 BCE. A quirky tidbit. Some tokens were sealed in clay envelopes to prevent fraud, like ancient receipts you couldn't fake. Historians still argue whether this system empowered workers like you, or just tied you tighter to the city's elite who controlled the tallies. You pocket a copper bead, a rare tip from that quiet weaver, and slide the tokens into a reed basket for Enki to check later. He's finally here, lurking by the entrance, counting jars like a vulture circling a carcass. You avoid his glare, focusing on the table, wiping it with a rag that's seen better days. Ishtar mutters about a trader who tried to pay with a broken sandal. You laugh, saying you'd rather have the sandal than another bad poem. Joke number 2. Uruk's poets should stick to drinking, not writing. The tavern's quiet now, save for the scribe's slurred verses and the potter's snores. You sweep the floor, kicking straws and clay shards into a pile. Your arms ache from pouring, your feet scream from standing. But there's a strange calm in the aftermath. You think back to the farmer's omen, a 2-headed calf, bad news, if you believe in signs. Nanshi's voice echoes in your head. Gods don't care for sloppy brewers. You hope your vats are safe. A stray cat slips in the same one from earlier, sniffing at a spilled puddle. You toss it a breadcrumb, and it darts off, ungrateful as ever. You and Ishtar haul the last jars to a storage corner, their weight dragging at your shoulders. She jokes about quitting to become a priestess, then laughs at her own lie. Too much work, not enough beer. You grin, feeling the night's grind in every muscle. Joke number 3, if exhaustion was a god, you'd be its high priestess. The tavern's done for now, but the brewery's not. You're on cleanup next, scrubbing vats under Enki's watchful eye. You steal a sip from a half-empty jar, the beer flat but sharp, a tiny rebellion against the slog ahead. You lean against the wall, the tavern's haze settling into your skin. Ishtar's humming something soft about a river's flow, and it soothes the ache in your bones. The night's winding down, Uruk's pulse slowing outside. You're almost free, but the vats wait and sleep's a distant dream. For now you breathe, clutching the weaver's reed charm in your belt, a small anchor in the tavern's fading storm. You're out of the tavern now, the night air cooler, but still heavy with Uruk's dust and distant smoke. The brewery courtyard's quiet, save for the faint clink of jars and a worker's tired cough. Your basket's empty, straws gone, and your tunic's a wreck. Flour beer and sweat have made it a second skin. You're on cleanup duty, scrubbing vats under the flicker of oil lamps hung on mud brick walls. Ishtar's with you, hauling a water jug, her usual fire dimmed by the long day. You grab a reed brush and a clay bucket, your shoulders screaming as you head to the vats. Joke number 1. You're not cleaning, you're wrestling clay demons in the dark. The vats are lined up like silent giants, their insides crusted with mash and yeast. You dip your brush in water, scrubbing the first one, the bristles scraping like a bad song. The work's mindless but brutal, your hands raw from the day's grind. Sumerians kept their breweries spotless with tablets, praising cleanliness as a gift to Ninkasi, the beer goddess. A quirky tidbit, some brewers used date pits to scrub vats, claiming they soaked up bad spirits along with the grime. Historians still argue whether this was practical or just superstition to keep the gods happy. You scrub harder water sloshing onto your sandals. Ishtar's at the next vat, muttering about Enki's stingy pay. He'd barter his own kids for barley, she says, and you laugh, nearly dropping your brush. Joke number 2. Enki's wallet's tighter than a sealed vat in a drought. The lamps cast long shadows, making the courtyard feel like a temple at midnight. You spot the young apprentice from earlier, sweeping straw, his eyes half closed. You toss him your last fig, his shy grin's worth it. Nanshi's wisdom rings in your head. Small kindnesses keep the brewery's heart beating. A vat stubborn, its crust clinging like a curse. You lean in, scrubbing until your arms burn, water dripping down your elbows. The air's sharp with yeast and damp clay, and a fly buzzes past your old enemy, still winning. Joke number 3. If you ever retire, you're opening a fly-swatting school. Ishtar splashes you by accident, and you splash back, both giggling like kids, until Enki's shadow looms nearby. You freeze, but he just grunts and moves on. Miracle of miracles, he's too tired to yell. You finish one vat, moving to the next. The bucket's water now, a murky soup. Your braids unraveling, and you tuck loose strands behind your ears, too exhausted to care. Ishtar's humming again, that river song from the tavern, and it's a lifeline in the slog. You think of the weaver's reed charm in your belt, its tiny weight grounding you. The day's been endless, grinding, stirring, serving. And now this. But there's a rhythm to it, like Uruk's pulse. You're part of something bigger, even if it's just keeping the beer flowing. The last vat's done, and you step back, hands on hips, surveying the row. They're clean, ready for tomorrow's mash. Ishtar slumps against a wall, wiping her brow. "We're heroes," she says, half serious. You nod, too tired to reply. The courtyard's empty now, the apprentice gone. Enki vanished. The lamps are dying, and the night's deep stars peeking through the haze. You grab your shawl, ready for the walk home, the brewery's hum fading behind you. You're trudging home Uruk's streets now. Hush, the night air cool against your sweat-damp tunic. The stars glitter above, sharp as scattered beads, and the Euphrates murmurs nearby, a soft echo of the day's chaos. Your sandals slap the packed dirt, each step heavy with exhaustion. The brewery's hum is gone, replaced by the city's quiet pulse, distant dog barks, a faint lullaby from a mud brick home. Your shawl's tight around your shoulders, the weaver's reed charm still tucked in your belt, a small weight of kindness. Joke number 1. You're so tired you'd barter your soul for a week's sleep, but even the gods don't deal in naps. The alleys are dark lit only by moonlight, and the occasional oil lamp flickering in a window. You pass a potter's workshop, its wheels still clay jars gleaming like ghosts. Sumerians believed stars were the eyes of gods, watching over cities like Uruk. And tonight you feel their gaze heavy, but not unkind. A quirky tidbit. Some tablets describe beer maids offering brews to the stars during festivals, as if the heavens themselves got thirsty. Historians still argue whether this was ritual or just an excuse to party under the sky. You dodge a stray goat, its eyes glinting, and mutter about it needing a leash. Joke number 2. Uruk's goats have better nightlife than you do. The day replays in your mind, grinding barley, stirring mash, dodging tavern drunks, scrubbing vats. Your hands are raw, your back aches, but there's pride in it. You kept the beer flowing, kept Uruk's heart beating, Ishtar's laugh, Nanshi's gruff wisdom, the apprentice's shy grin, they're your tether proof. You're not just a shadow in the city's sprawl. Your home's close, its mud brick walls a welcome sight. You push the creaky door, the room cool and dim, smelling of reed mats and dried dates. You collapse onto your mat, not bothering to untie your sandals. The silence is a gift, wrapping you like a soft shawl. Joke number 3. If sleep was a god, you'd build it a ziggurat tomorrow. You clutch the reed charm, its texture grounding you, and let the day slip away. Uruk's stars standing guard outside. The world softens now, the edges of Uruk blurring into a gentle haze. Your breath slows each inhale, pulling you deeper into the mat's embrace. The Euphrates whispers beyond the walls, its current a lullaby, older than the city itself. The stars, those watchful gods, dim in your mind, their light fading into a dreamlike glow. You're no longer just a beer maid. You're part of Uruk's endless rhythm, its grit and grace woven into your bones. The brewery's hum, the tavern's roar, the weight of clay jars, they dissolve, leaving only warmth like a palm's shade at midday. Let the night carry you soft and sure into a sleep as deep as the river's flow. Tomorrow waits, but for now, you're held safe in the quiet, the world's pulse a distant soothing hum. Rest and let the stars keep their secrets.